They killed my brother, so I spilled their honor. That is how the tale begins, not with glory, not with prophecy, but with blood drying upon stone. I write these words as the sun falls red upon Hebron's gates and the flies still gather where men once knelt to swear allegiance. Let the scribes of the future judge me if they must, but let them also know this: vengeance has a taste, metallic and bitter, like iron drawn from the soil. I am Joab son of Zeruiah, commander once of David's hosts, brother to Abishai and Asahel, servant to a crown that sat uneasy upon the head of Israel's king. But before the songs, before the wars, before the crowns and banners, I was a brother, and they took that from me. Asahel was swift, too swift for his own flesh. The boy ran like the wind that passes between the stones of the valley. In battle he was the first to strike, the last to retreat, and on the day Abner's spear found him, the wind stopped. It was said Abner warned him. It was said the boy would not turn back. Perhaps both are true, but truth does not soothe the sound a brother makes when he dies, the gasp, the gurgle, the final reaching for a name. I heard none of it. I came after when the field was quiet and the vultures had begun their slow descent. They told me where he fell. They said Abner had fled, breathless and pale, his hands still trembling. I remember kneeling beside the body, the dust clinging to Asahel's curls, the wound in his belly black with dried blood. I remember lifting him, feeling how light he had become. He was my brother, my duty, my proof that the world once held something pure. When a man loses his brother, the world divides. There is the hour before, when the air still knows laughter, and the hour after, when every sound tastes of ash. I buried him myself beneath a terebinth tree. The roots drank what I could not weep. They said time would heal, they lied. Time does not heal, it merely teaches the wound to hide. So I waited, and when the hour came, I did what a brother must do. I sent messengers to Abner speaking peace. My lips shaped the word, but my heart did not. He came to Hebron under the shadow of the gate, smiling as though we were still comrades bound by war. He came to talk of alliance, of uniting the tribes under David's reign. I greeted him with open arms and led him into the chamber where the air was still and narrow. There, beneath the beam of stone, I struck him, one blow beneath the fifth rib, the same place my brother's blood had spilled. I felt the breath leave Abner, and in that moment I thought the world would exhale with him, that grief would end, that silence would heal. It did not. The city knew, David mourned, the priests tore their robes and the women wailed in the streets. They said, Joab has defiled the kingdom. But I knew the truth, vengeance had already defiled it long before my hand found the hilt. They buried Abner in Hebron. I did not attend. What could I say before his grave? That I had done what the law forbade but the blood demanded, that justice was too slow for a brother's pain. I remained in my house for 7 days. I washed the blade in water drawn from the well of my youth, where Asahel and I had once thrown stones to see whose ripples reached farther. Now there were no ripples, only a reflection of a man who no longer recognized his own eyes. But the world moved. Kings rose, kings fell, and I, Joab, endured. I commanded the armies of Israel. I conquered, I counseled, I killed. And yet in quiet hours I heard a sound beneath the weight of victory, the whisper of Asahel's name in every silence. Then one night when the moon was thin as a sickle, I heard a knock upon my gate. It was an old soldier, his face marked by dust and distance. He said, Commander, the king seeks peace with the house of Saul. Abner's kin will return. I said nothing. But within me something stirred, not anger, not fear, but a recognition. For vengeance is not content with one death, it feeds on memory, it drinks until it is drunk on silence. I dismissed the soldier. When he left, I went to the courtyard where my brother's spear still rested against the wall. I had kept it, though its shaft was cracked, though its edge had dulled. I ran my hand along the wood and whispered, He is avenged, yet I am not. That night sleep fled. I sat by the lamp until dawn, watching the oil burn thin, thinking of Abner's face as he fell. Not in hatred, I had no hatred left, but in a strange kinship. We were both men condemned by the same God, the God of retaliation. Years passed, and still the air of Hebron carried that scent, iron and dust and memory. Children grew who knew only the legend, not the grief. They whispered that Joab's wrath had brought a curse upon the city, that no harvest thrived where the blood of the innocent had been spilled. I did not argue. Perhaps they were right. For vengeance is a seed that does not die. It roots in the bones of the earth and drinks the tears of generations. I began to see it then, the true cost. The city had learned my language. Every insult demanded an answer, every injury a retribution. Where once men spoke of justice, they now spoke of balance, and balance in a world like ours meant blood for blood. When I walked through the market, people fell silent, not from reverence but from fear that my shadow might summon the past again. I had become a living curse, a relic of grief too sharp to name. At night I dreamed of Asahel not as he was, but as he might have been older, wiser, laughing at my folly. In those dreams he spoke gently, "Brother, you avenged me, but did you redeem me?" And I could not answer, for what redemption lies in the ruin of others. I turned inward, my sword grew rusted from disuse, but my mind sharpened on memory. I became historian of my own crime, a keeper of silence. I recorded nothing for the king, only for myself. The words were my chains and my prayer. I wrote, "To avenge is to wound twice, once the flesh, once the soul." The city quieted after that, or perhaps it merely learned to whisper its guilt. Even the priests ceased to speak my name aloud. They feared to remind heaven that I still lived. In time I came to understand the strangest truth of all, that vengeance, once begun, cannot be owned. It moves from man to man, name to name, like a plague seeking new blood. It had passed through me, through David, through the city, and now it lingered over all. When I walked by night, the streets were empty and the oil lamps guttered as if bowing to something unseen. The dogs did not bark, the wind did not stir. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting for the next wound to speak. Then came the famine, the wells dried, the earth cracked. The elders said it was judgment for blood unatoned. I said nothing. There are judgments even kings cannot lift. And in that stillness, it began as a whisper in the bones, that voice which comes when all others fall silent. I would wake in the depth of night and feel the air grow thick, as if the earth itself were remembering. "You took a man's breath," it said. "Now what will you give back?" I had no answer, for vengeance takes, but it gives nothing. It is a fire that pretends to warm you while it devours your own skin. I walked to Asahel's grave more often then. The terebinth had grown vast, its roots breaking the soil like old scars. Beneath it lay the bones of a youth who once outran death until death learned to run faster. I would kneel and trace my fingers over the cracked stones. "You are avenged," I would whisper, "but I am not forgiven." Sometimes when the wind turned east, I heard what sounded like footsteps behind me. I would turn, thinking Abner stood there once more, blood blooming through his cloak, but it was only the branches shifting, the leaves sighing like the dying. Still the feeling grew, the air changed. It carried the heaviness of eyes unseen. The city itself began to age faster, as though guilt were sickness in its foundation. One morning a boy ran to me shouting, "Commander, the king calls for you. There is war again." War, the only language left to us. David had taken new enemies, new crowns to claim. And so I went, sword once more at my side. I fought, and Israel triumphed, but each victory felt like a hollow echo of something long broken. For every man who fell, I saw Asahel's face. For every enemy slain, I heard Abner's breath leaving him again. When we returned, the city welcomed us with songs, but I could no longer bear the sound. I turned away from the women who sang, from the children who danced. Their joy was too bright, too alive, and I had long forgotten how to stand in the light. Then came the whispering that the king no longer trusted me, that he spoke of new commanders, younger, gentler men, men without ghosts. It was then that I saw the true face of vengeance, not fury but emptiness. When all the killing is done, it leaves behind a silence that rots. I found myself haunted by memories not of what I had done but of what I had become. I was the sword that could not be sheathed, the hand that had forgotten mercy. One night, as I stood in my chamber, a lamp flickered out, and in the dark I heard a voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "Joab, blood calls to blood." I froze. I turned, expecting a man, a soldier, a thief, but there was none. Only the shadow of my own figure against the wall. The shadow's head bowed, its lips unmoving, yet I heard it speak again, closer now, within the chambers of my mind. "The debt is not yet paid." I fled from the house. Into the streets, into the night air heavy with the scent of decay. I ran through the gate, up the hill toward the tree where Asahel slept. There the moonlight caught the stone and turned it pale as bone. "Have I not done enough?" I cried. "Has not the ground swallowed enough blood?" No answer came, only the wind, cold and merciless, whispering through the branches. When I returned, dawn had begun to break. The first light touched Hebron's roofs like fire on copper. And I understood that vengeance was not a single act but a covenant. Once made, it binds a man until death and sometimes beyond it. Years passed, I served the king still, though distance grew between us. He was weary of war, I was made of it. Where he sought peace, I saw only weakness. Where he forgave, I remembered. Then came the matter of Absalom, the son who rose against his father. The boy was beautiful, cunning, beloved by the people. When David fled from Jerusalem, it was I who led the armies to reclaim the throne. And when Absalom was caught by his hair in the branches of the oak, it was I who struck him down. The king wept when he heard, he cried, "O Absalom, my son," but I stood in silence, for I had learned that mercy and kingship rarely share the same throne. Yet in killing that son I felt the curse deepen, for the wind that once carried Asahel's name now carried another Absalom, and behind it still another Abner. They whispered together, forming a choir of the condemned, and I, their conductor, could no longer stop the song. The seasons turned. My beard grew gray, my hands trembled not from fear but from the weight of all they had held. The king grew old, his eyes dimmed, and talk arose of Solomon, the son of peace, who would inherit the crown. Peace, a word I had forgotten. When David died, I knew my own end would follow soon. For new kings love new loyalties, and I was a relic of war, too proud to kneel, too bloodstained to bless. They came for me at dawn. I had taken refuge by the altar, my hands upon the horns of the sacred stone. It was said no blood could be spilled there, but I knew better. Benaiah, the king's captain, entered. His eyes did not meet mine. He said, "The king commands your death, Joab. You slew Abner, you slew Amasa, you have defiled the land with innocent blood." I laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. "Innocent, show me such a man." He hesitated. "Let go the altar, old wolf." I did not. My fingers gripped the cold horn like a man clinging to the last remnant of his soul. "If I must die," I said, "then let it be here where God can watch." Benaiah nodded. "So be it." His blade flashed once, bright, clean, merciful. And as I fell, I felt the dust of the earth embrace me, the same dust that had once covered Asahel's curls. But death was not silence. In that moment between breath and oblivion, I saw them, Asahel, Abner, Absalom, standing upon a plain of pale light. They said nothing, only watched. And then, as the darkness gathered, Asahel stepped forward and laid his hand upon my shoulder. "Brother," he said, his voice like wind over water, "you have avenged me, now rest." But behind his words I heard another echo, older, deeper, a truth that no mortal tongue could shape. Vengeance is never finished. It merely changes its bearer. The light dimmed, the plain dissolved. And somewhere in Hebron a child was born that same night, his first cry sharp as steel drawn from its sheath. The cycle had begun again. For in every generation there will rise another Joab, another soul who believes that pain can be balanced, that grief can be measured in blood. And always the earth will remember, the stones will whisper, the wind will carry the names. For vengeance once spoken never truly dies. Author's note. This account is written in the voice of Joab, soldier, brother, executioner, and historian of his own damnation. It is not a parable of righteousness nor a sermon but a testimony to the oldest covenant between grief and guilt. In his tale lies the warning every age forgets, that revenge is not justice and blood does not quench fire, it feeds it.